Welcome back to The People's Voice on Salaamedia. I'm going to start a live Facebook video from the Salaamedia Facebook page so that people in my networks will be able to enjoy the next segment where we're in conversation with Imtiaz Ahmed Cajee, the nephew of Ahmed Timol. So I'm looking for the video on the page and it should pop up very, very shortly. You can watch the video on the Salaamedia page, or of course, you could start a watch party to your own page. Absolutely fantastic. We love the technology that we can use, especially during lockdown. Okay, I'm going to start that video now. And there we go. The watch party begins. So the next half of The People's Voice this evening, we're in conversation with Imtiaz Ahmed Cajee, of course, nephew of anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Timol. Welcome, Imtiaz. If you are backstage, something you can bring him on. Welcome to Imtiaz Ahmed Cajee to The People's Voice on Salaamedia. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Shabnam, and many thanks for hosting me on your show this evening.
Absolute pleasure. Imtiaz, we're running a little late, so we're going to have to innovate and adapt as best we can. But let's start here. Teacher, revolutionary martyr. Share with us some of the highlights in the life of your uncle and the apartheid activist, Ahmed Timons.
Look, I think there are a number of incidents in his life that stand out for me, Shabnam. I think the first is that he, with his comrade, late Ambassador Jojo Saluji, stand up for Hindu residents of Roodepoort who were not given permission to attend the Roodepoort club. So this was profound that in the 60s, Uncle Ahmed's stand was not against the racist regime and against the racist apartheid ideology alone, but also against racists, within the community in Roodepoort. And for me, that was profound because this was something that he was doing, even prior to him getting his political training. Then he's an educator, Shabnam, using the classroom to educate and conscientize his students. I mean, very, very dangerous situation because it's a government school. And if he gets exposed politicizing his students, he's at great risk of being kicked out of the teaching profession. And then I think for me, ultimately, to leave Ruth Longoni in London, Shabnam, and to come to South Africa to set up underground structures, I think for me was absolutely profound. That demonstrated that he was not just prepared to sit and continue the struggle from London, but rather get on the ground and mobilize people within a very difficult era in South Africa during that time.
Absolutely. They're in the trenches. Ahmed Timol arrested at a roadblock for having political literature, including flyers about the priest who was fasting in solidarity against the murder of Imam Abdullah Harun. So obviously he means a lot to a lot of people. But after hearing your grandmother's tearful testimony in 1996 following his murder in 1971, may he rest in peace, you swore to find truth and justice. Now in 2017, an announcement of a reopened inquest was made because everyone wants to know the truth, right? What has that journey been like for you, Imtiaz, from then, 2017 up till now?
No, it's been an epic journey, Shabnam. I mean, obviously the first book written as an obedient nephew, but the second book, I'm confronting very, very difficult and sensitive issues that have always been mentioned, in very subtle terms. People are afraid to confront the issues, and I've confronted them directly, which revolve around Uncle Ahmed's arrest, which I've definitely proven within my book that it was orchestrated by the security branch police. And without a doubt, there were informants within the community, who were complicit, who shared information with the security police that led to Uncle Ahmed's arrest. And I've confronted these issues in the second book. But post the 2017 inquest, Shabnam, there's been lots of developments. I think many personal events that have unfolded. The cynics and the skeptics in our community always probe questions, and that is their job because they are armchair critics. And now posing questions about my motives, trying to understand what am I trying to accomplish. Am I seeking glory or fame? And I think this is all as a result of me touching very, very sensitive nerves and going after the jugular, after those people who are complicit and compromised in one way or the other. That led to Uncle Ahmed's arrest and his ultimate death. So these are some of the issues that have happened. And I think very, very painfully for me personally, during this course of my journey, my wife passed away. And in a few weeks' time, it's going to be, her first anniversary. So very difficult, painful times for me because she was a pillar of strength, always in the background, always her intuition and instinctive response was always spot on. Even when she never met people, she could warn me and tip me off about people. So a tremendous loss to me in my journey. And it's a great pity to me that, with the progress I've made with the publication of the second book, physically she's not here with me.
May her soul rest in peace, and I'm sure that she is extremely proud of you, Imtiaz. We've got a question from Nawawi Matthews. Imtiaz, the day that Beki Mlangeni was assassinated, who's been investigating hit squads in South Africa? How did it impact on your investigation seeking the truth for the murder of Uncle Ahmed?
You see, it's a very important question, Shabnam, because, my journey has brought me into contact with many, many other families. From the Western Cape, the Eastern Cape, to KwaZulu-Natal, to Mpumalanga, and to Gauteng. And all these families are asking exactly the same question, Shabnam. How was it possible for you, being only 5 years old at the time, to have reopened Uncle Ahmed's inquest? And why is nobody opening and reinvestigating the killing of Beki Mlangeni, Imam Harun, Lux Martin Druli, Mapetla Mohapi, Dr. Hussein Hafiji? And these are very pertinent questions, which brings us to very, very pertinent issues in a democratic South Africa, about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, about the role of the National Prosecuting Authority, and ultimately the government of the day that must be held accountable for not reinvestigating more than 300 TRC cases, Shabnam.
So, Imtiaz, who's covering up for who and why? Because the question always remains, who benefits from this cover-up? I mean, it is a cover-up, clearly. Who's benefiting?
No, most certainly. But, if we go back and, we look at the TRC here in Shabnam, Rodriguez was investigated by a TRC investigator, yet he does not get subpoenaed to testify. The likes of Gloy and Van Niekerk and all the other security branch officers were not subpoenaed to testify. If they had all appeared at the TRC, we would have had a completely different scenario of events. We fast forward to 2003. I specifically asked the National Director of Public Prosecutions to investigate the matter, providing evidence at their disposal, and once again, they closed this matter. So without a doubt, the NPA, the Hawks, the TRC itself, have got a lot to account for, because it is very evident that there's been a concerted effort, to make sure that TRC cases are not reopened, they are not reinvestigated. But we've been very fortunate and blessed that the fact that the Rodriguez matter is now sitting with the Supreme Court of Appeal, where it is already emerged, where the likes of senior prosecutors at the NPA are now talking of political interference, Shabnam. So we eagerly await, for the SCA to give direction in this particular matter. Our brother Lucanio Calata has made a submission to the Zondo Commission, requesting the Zondo Commission to investigate why the NPA has failed to investigate more than 300 TRC cases. So these
I don't know whether we can rely on the Zondo Commission to do anything for us, to be quite honest, Imtiaz. Ashraf Mohamed says, seeking justice is a long, hard journey, but don't give up. Sorry for your loss, Imtiaz. And Jumara Khan says, she is still guiding you from above. Mushtaq Sheikh says, it's time to hold the MTA accountable for delays in investigations, as well as the SAPS that continues to pay benefits, medical aid, and pensions to apartheid-era state-sanctioned killers. I mean, what else are you supposed to call them? That's what they are, right? The apartheid security forces who used to joke Indians can't fly because they were busy pushing Indians and others out of the window. You're facing that. You're facing corrupt judicial interference. I mean, that's a fact. We cannot shy away from that. And diabolical political interference by the post-apartheid government, who are captured. And still you remain dedicated to justice for Ahmed Timol, your uncle, and so many like him, gone but not forgotten. What keeps you motivated, Imtiaz?
Look, my grandmother's words are very profound, Shabnam. When I would probe about Uncle Ahmed, she would ask me about Suleiman Babla Saluji. Why is nobody following up on the killing of Suleiman Babla Saluji? When Neil Agate was killed in police detention in the early 80s, my grandmother wrote a letter to Dr. Neil Agate's mother. And that clearly demonstrated for me that, despite the fact that she was mourning and grieving the loss of her beloved son, she continued feeling the pain for all the other mothers. So her words are always profound to me and continue to inspire me that, yes, I've made progress with the blessing of the Almighty. We've reopened the inquest, we've reversed the inquest findings, but the struggle is far from over. And the same plight that was afforded to my beloved uncle must be afforded to all other anti-apartheid activists, so that the daughters of Mapetla Mohapi must know, that their father never committed suicide when they were 1 and 2 years old, but he was brutally killed in police detention.
They need the closure. The families need the closure, but not all of them have a nephew who can write a book about the murders of their loved ones. Your two books about the murder of Ahmed Timol, what was the experience like for you, Imtiaz, writing them? It couldn't have been easy. It's traumatic. And how has that process changed your life?
No, it's been an epic journey, Shabnam. I don't think there's any words that can describe my journey. Obviously, the first book written as an obedient nephew, wanting to put Uncle Ahmed's biography in a public domain, which we successfully did in 2005. But the second book, especially when I got to the periphery of getting close to what really happened to Uncle Ahmed, makes many, many uncomfortable within our communities. In fact, many comrades become uncomfortable. And this raises pertinent questions as what is it that they are protecting? What is it that they are hiding? And the only conclusion that I come to is that they are complicit in one way or the other, or the fact that they've got to live with reality that they've done very little to fight for truth and justice for my beloved uncle. So my persistence and perseverance has made many, many uncomfortable, has closed many doors for me, but in the same breath, many new doors have opened to me. And that is why I work with many, many other families to ensure that, that they can have a similar plight in a democratic South Africa.
We've got a comment here for you. Enough talk from Mushtaq Sheikh. He says, enough talk. It's time for action and change. The apartheid state of pre-1994 is still alive in 2020 and embolden their supporters to continue acting with impunity. 100% agree. Political freedom was completely limited to what was put in front of our eyes. And Nawawi Matthews has a question, but before we get to that one, I want to talk about the TRC. So it's 25 years since the Promotion of National Unity and Reconciliation Act was signed into existence. Lovely piece of paper, they all are. But the TRC did not achieve what it was supposed to, right? If we were to have another TRC type project, Imtiaz, what should be done differently? Should we perhaps be following the model that Argentina is using, which includes cancelling amnesty for these criminals?
Look, I still maintain and believe that, we need to give apartheid era perpetrators an opportunity to make full disclosures, which is what the TRC had offered them, Shabnam. But the reality is that, they have not taken up the offer. It's the approach of a carrot and a stick. We continue dangling the carrot, and we get absolutely no response from them, no remorse, no full disclosure. And in those particular circumstances, they must face the full wrath of the law, because it doesn't really help us, for them to be sentenced and persecuted without us getting to know what happened to our loved ones. But the model of the TRC in South Africa continues to be viewed as a very successful model. And this is something that we need to question, because post-TRC, absolutely nothing has transpired. So the TRC model on its own cannot be seen as an excellent model, because it has failed many, many families throughout the length and breadth of this country. And this is something that we need to contest.
If the actual truth came out, Imtiaz, if the actual truth came out about what happened to Ahmed Timol and all of the other political anti-apartheid activists, we would see a revolution in this country. Elisha Ramnandla says, cancel amnesty. Ashraf Mohamed says, I agree, too little has been done for truth and justice. And we're going to come back to that question from Wally in a sec. But Qasim Khan, and I'm sure you know this, has started a petition to Cyril Ramaphosa demanding a very specific commission of inquiry with very specific terms of inquiry into 300 TRC cases. Do you support this call or not, and why?
No, most certainly. I work very closely with Qasim. Qasim represents the apartheid era victims family group, where for 2 consecutive years, Shabnam, we've been writing to President Ramaphosa, asking him to intervene on the failure of the TRC, or on the failure of the NPA to investigate TRC cases. And the reality is that he has not even dignified us with a response. So most certainly,
in 2 years, Cyril Ramaphosa has not responded to you.
Yes, for 2 consecutive years, we had written to him, Shabnam, and on both occasions, we have not received absolutely no response from the presidency. And that is why we've embarked on this campaign to obtain signatures as one particular form of us as a social society, exerting pressure on the government of the day. So most certainly, we support the petition. And that is why we look so forward to the SCA Supreme Court of Appeal hearing on João Rodrigues, because ultimately we are depending on the courts, to take government to task to ensure that this matter get attended to.
I don't know about that. We can hope for the best, but certainly there are indications that even the judiciary in different ways is also captured. So we'll have to, as civil society, be keeping an eye on what happens in this matter. And not just that, but get actively involved. Ashraf Mohamed says, justice was absent from the TRC, too much emphasis on reconciliation without adequate truth and no justice for the victims and the families. For those Babulia says, articulate, compassionate Imtiaz. Let's move on from there. Imtiaz wa Mui Mbao, and I absolutely love this piece that was written, draws powerful comparisons between the murders of George Floyd in America to the murder of Ahmed Timol in South Africa. Take us through the sense of perspective.
No, it was a brilliant analysis. I mean, he talks about the brutal killing of George Floyd, and in the same breath, the killing of Ahmed Timol during the apartheid era. And very painfully for many of us, even in a democratic South Africa, the Marikana killing. So the issue of police brutality, very, very significant, very, very relevant, and continues in America for American Negroes. We then find the issue of the role of media. Again, media were very critical to ensure that the perpetrators for the killing of George Floyd were brought to task. In a similar vein, media played a critical role in the 72 inquest, in the 2017 inquest, and sessions like yours this evening continue to ensure that that the name of Ahmed Timol is never forgotten. He then makes a very important analysis on the role of Nazi guards, that were prosecuted decades later. And yet in democratic South Africa, the likes of Neville Els and Seth's sons are simply let off scot-free by the National Prosecuting Authority, despite the fact that we had 5 affidavits that confirmed that they were personally tortured by Seth's sons, and yes, the NPA has failed to charge them. So he makes very, very important analysis and the similar challenges that we face in a democratic South Africa to what our brothers face in the United States of America.
100%. I mean, the more I listen to you, Imtiaz, I ask myself, who's really in charge of this country? Clearly, and this is my view, and I'm very, very public about it, is that political parties and ruling parties are managing agents. Who's really in charge of a country and its resources are the people behind the curtain. And the more I listen to you, it's obvious that that's the case even in our country. And I think we need to take the wool off our eyes and take action. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Nawabi Matthew's question, is there a message you would like to share with young activists seeking justice for the sake of truth in South Africa? What would that message be, Imtiaz?
No, it is very, very relevant, and again, a very important question that, the struggle continues. The struggle continues in different forms. And my journey has just demonstrated as a nephew who was only 5 years old at the time, that because of my dedication and commitment, the name of Uncle Ahmed continues to resonate in democratic South Africa. So these youths, these activists need to be in contact with many, many apartheid-era families throughout the length and breadth of this country, who are desperately seeking and searching to ensure that their memories, that their legacies continues to resonate in a democratic South Africa. And they're more than welcome to be in contact with me, because there are many initiatives that we are planning, so that the issue of truth and justice is not just for Ahmed Timol, but for all our fallen heroes and heroines, our martyrs, who will never be forgotten.
Absolutely agree with you. So, Imtiaz, I want to ask you this. How can people actively support campaigns for justice and closure for Ahmed Timol, but also for the hundreds of other anti-apartheid activists and their families, and at the same time, activists that are still being harassed, intimidated, and murdered now? But let's start with the anti-apartheid activists and that campaign. How can civil society support the call for justice?
The media campaign, it is so powerful, and my journey has demonstrated this, Shabnam. The only reason that João Rodrigues was subpoenaed to testify in the 2017 inquest was because his daughter had seen the news reports on the reopening of the Ahmed Timol inquest. So if it was not for media and the media campaign that we had embarked upon, it is highly probable that Rodrigues would have witnessed the 2017 reopening of the inquest in the comforts of his home, as he probably watched my grandmother testify at the TRC hearings. So media is a very, very powerful tool, and it is something that we use consistently to ensure that my uncle's matter continues to remain in the public domain. I mean, a session like yours this evening is very significant, is very powerful, that people must know that these questions continue to be confronted, irrespective of how difficult they might be. But the fact that they appear on social media, Rodriguez court appearances are reported in the media. Anniversaries of all our comrades who had fallen is commemorated in democratic South Africa. These are all avenues, to clearly demonstrate that our fallen heroes have never been forgotten, and that democratic South Africa, especially the youth, must play a pivotal part in ensuring that that our heroes can never be forgotten.
100% agree with you. Some powerful comments coming through on the Salaamedia live video from Tesna Aston, and she says, why would the perpetrators talk when they don't believe what they did was actually wrong? That is a perspective. They don't actually think what they were doing was wrong. They were just doing the jobs. But the flip side to that is they are protecting very powerful political elite interests and their bosses that stand behind them. She also says, Tesna Aston, if Israel could be remunerated by Nazi Germany at the time, why is it that we were led to believe in the lie of rainbowism without compensation? Do you want to speak a minute to that one, Imtiaz?
No, again, very, very important point, Shabnam. I mean, the reality is that, we've witnessed so many elections, local and national government elections. There's never been a single political party that has mentioned anything about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I think that speaks a mouthful. And that clearly gives a clear message to many, many of us that despite the fact that these comrades who are in the corridors of power have lost their comrades in the trenches with them, and the fact that they are making absolutely no attempt in a democratic South Africa to find justice for their families is very, very profound, very, very painful, and a clear indication to us that we are on our own. And the fact that we have media personalities like yourself on social media, we will ensure that these matters never get forgotten and justice will be found for all our fallen heroes and heroines.
Absolutely agree. We need to remain resolute. That's the only way forward. Tesna also says, it pains me so much because it means that anti-apartheid activists lost their lives for nothing. Do you agree with that statement, Imtiaz?
Look, it's a very difficult question to ask. And despite all the challenges that we face, Shabnam, we still live in a democratic South Africa. And that only happened not because de Klerk gave us freedom on a golden platter. It was because of the lives of Ahmed Timol, Bantu Stephen Biko, the Klerk 4, and many, many others that forced the likes of de Klerk and his regime to give us democracy. So I would always be very, very cautious to say that they never died in vain. The fact that you and I can speak very freely today and openly criticize our government is a clearly sign that we have made progress, but without any doubt, much more needs to happen.
Absolutely agree. Patriotism to our people is paramount, not patriotism to any government. And before I ask you, I'm going to ask you to close with a message for Cyril Ramaphosa, because I think that's important, if you believe, of course, that he's the man in charge. But before we go there, Imtiaz, where can people find copies of your two very important and critical books to understand the history and the future of our country?
Yes, Shabnam. My first book, titled Timor Quest for Justice, is freely available in a PDF format on my website, www.ahmedtimol.co.za. And my second book that has just recently been published is available at all exclusive bookstores nationwide. And the intention is that, inshallah, next year with COVID that has passed us and we are all safe and well, that we have national book launches throughout the country so that people can attend and also commemorate Uncle Ahmed's 50th anniversary, which will take place in 2021, and also celebrate the lives of many, many our other heroes, who've been forgotten in a democratic South Africa.
100%. I can give you 30 seconds for a message directly to Cyril Ramaphosa. What would you like to say to him, Imtiaz?
We are not going to disappear, President Ramaphosa. We are here, and irrespective of how difficult you might find it, face the reality that we are going nowhere, and we will continue confronting you, fighting for truth and justice for all our heroes and our heroines, our martyrs.
Amanla to that. Thank you very much, Comrade Imtiaz Ahmed Cajee, for joining us on The People's Voice, and truth and justice for Imtiaz Timol and all of our martyrs that brought us to democratic South Africa, still fighting for freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for hosting me, Shabnam.
Absolutely fantastic. I want to say thank you to both our brilliant guests today, Karima Brown as well as Imtiaz Ahmed Cajee, for joining us on The People's Voice, and of course our listeners and our viewers and the Salaamedia team. Remember to ask yourself every day, what am I doing to make my country and my world a better place? Revolutionary peace. Assalamu alaikum.